Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Worship Service. I am Alice Hardy, and I am a member of the worship team. Whether you are watching us this Sunday morning or catching up with us during the week, thank you for joining us during this sacred time. So whoever you are and wherever you are, we are delighted that you are with us. I have a few announcements this morning. Friday's morning's newsletter is filled with many exciting and interesting upcoming UUTC events, along with these reminders. If you ordered a calendar, please pick them up tomorrow, November 30th, Monday, between 10 and 12, via a drive-up and pick-up system, thanks to the stewardship team. Also, there's an invitation from the worship team inviting you to join the Bank of Reading projects. If you are interested in details on that project, please read your newsletter. And a special congratulations to Tom Lander for winning first place in the Brevard photo competition. Congratulations. In a few minutes, we will be joined by our friend and member of this congregation, Reverend Carter Hayward. Carter is a native of North Carolina who spent her childhood in Hendersonville. She was on the faculty of the Episcopal Divinity School in Cambridge, Mass. For 30 years before retiring here about 20 years ago. She is a founder of Free Rein Center for Therapeutic Riding in Brevard and is currently active in the local NAACP. She describes herself as a universalist Christian and continues to write and speak at the intersections of social transformation and spiritual empowerment. Reverend Hayward will be our guest speaker this morning. Please relax, take a deep breath, and enjoy the music. Opening words today come from our hymnal. They are the words of UU minister and writer William S. Schultz. Come into this place of peace, and let its silence heal your spirit. Come into this place of memory, and let its history warm your soul. Come into this place of prophecy and power, and let its vision change your heart. I light our chalice this morning with words from Melanie Daves titled, A Spark of Hope. If ever there was a time for a candle in the darkness, this would be it. Using a spark of hope, kindle the flame of love and ignite the light of peace, and feed the flame of justice. I turn to our candles of joys and concerns. If at this time you wish to share a joy or personal concern, please type it into the chat box so those watching can hold your thoughts close. From our hymnal, number 475, I shall light candles to honor the words from the document titled, We, the Peoples of the United Nations. We reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights, in the dignity and the worth of the human person, in the equal rights of men and women and of all nations, large and small. We unite our faith and strength to maintain international peace and security. I light a candle. So to practice tolerance and to live together in peace as good neighbors. Let it be so.
I am waiting in the silence. I am waiting for the dawn. I am often found in reverence, though from many sources drawn. It is not mine to fight for justice, for it will not be won this day. I am peace, and I am waiting for the lost to find their way. You'll not find me set in judgment of the vain or of the weak, but I rise to meet the weary with the solace that they seek. Still I have not fed the hungry, nor strewn wealth upon the poor. I am peace, and bring but mystery, and the patience to endure. I cannot save the suffering from their anger and their pain. Only open doors of insight, so the healing comes again. To the proud I am elusive, to the humble I am near. May the broken rise and look beyond the trappings of their fears. I am found among the seasons, autumn's death and spring's rebirth. As relentless their momentum as the turning of the earth. All are welcome in my presence, for only love can conquer hate. I am peace, and for the harvest I have planted and will wait.
Good morning, and thank you, Alice. It's nice to be part of the service this morning, and I hope everybody has had a peaceful and a happy Thanksgiving holiday. We have heard the quote again and again. It's often attributed to Martin Luther King, who memorably cited it in the context of the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s. The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. The origins of this insight and quote, however, reach back at least as far as into the mid-19th century America, where we find its roots in a sermon published in 1853 by Unitarian minister and American transcendentalist Theodore Parker. Look at the facts of the world, Parker urged. Excuse me. I do not pretend to understand the moral universe. The arc is a long one. My eye reaches but little ways. I cannot calculate the cure and complete the figure by the experience of sight. I can divine it by conscience. But from what I see, I am sure it bends toward justice. Things refuse to be mismanaged long. Jefferson trembled when he thought of slavery and remembered that God is just. Ere long, all America will tremble. End of quote. With these words, in 1853, Theodore Parker presaged the Civil War. More than 50 years later, in a 1918 volume, Readings from Great Authors, we find the statement trimmed down and attributed to Theodore Parker in the concise form that would be cited 50 years later still by Martin Luther King Jr. The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. A couple of months ago, when Alice asked me to preach this morning, I was glad to say yes, but not to give a theme or title until after the election. That may or may not have been a wise decision, although as I prepared this reflection, I realized that what I have to say this morning has no more to do with what happened on November the 3rd than on what's always going on around us and within us. Here's how I described the theme of the sermon when Alice asked me. At the heart of our healing from bitter social discord, political fatigue, and personal brokenness is revolutionary patience, a blending of a relentless commitment to healing and liberation with an ability to wait with open hearts and minds. Henri Nouwen called patience the discipline of compassion. He meant that patience is the activity of compassion, compassion in action. It's how compassion works. Patience. German Christian liberation theologian Dorothea Zola was a feminist poet, a mystic, an activist, and a teacher in the latter half of the 20th century. She coined the term revolutionary patience as a way of describing our moral grounding in the ongoing work of co-creation with God. Perhaps Theodore Parker would say our moral grounding in our following, in our climbing, and our bending and shaping, the arc of the moral universe. In her last book, completed shortly before her death in 2003, Dorothea reflected on the way of transformation in which those grounded in revolutionary patience participate in the ongoing creation. We live simultaneously as healers and resistors, she said. We live in compassion and justice co-creatively. A mystic to her bones, Zola believed, as do I, that we are partnered with the sacred, with God, not for Zola or for me a theistic power, but rather a panentheistic spirit infusing all creation. We are co-creators together with one another, with the rest of creation, and with the Creator, the creative spirit. We work and we wait. We wait and we work. We work and we wait. We wait and we work. Terry emailed me a couple of weeks ago and sent me a link to Jim Scott's song, I Am Waiting, which we have just heard. She asked if I thought this would be good for the service today. My first response was no, because I found myself balking at the words, "It's not mine to fight for justice." But upon deeper listening, and especially paired up with our other music today, I got back to Terry and said, yes, let's do Jim Scott's song. I believe it bears wisdom if and when we are able to hear it in the radically mystical, deeply moral way in which it is offered by Jim Scott. Not as a repudiation of our struggles for social justice, but rather as a grounding of our work and our efforts in sacred time, or kairos, this is the Greek word for sacred time, in which the time we measure by clocks and calendars is restricted by the limits of what we humans can see and know. In a spirit of kairos, sacred time, and referring to whatever is truly good, moral, God by whatever names and images, Theodore Parker and Dorothy Zola would concur with Jim Scott, who sang, "To the proud I am elusive, to the humble I am near. I am found among the seasons, autumn's death and spring's rebirth, as relentless their momentum as the turning of the earth." So then, that is our context, politically, spiritually, socially, psychologically, metaphysically. It's where we are in sacred time and in space, under the ark, climbing the ark, swinging from the moral arc of the universe, as on we go. So what then is our moral work as on we go? I believe our moral work is to exercise revolutionary patience as we become more and more better lovers of the world, the creation, one another, including our enemies, and ourselves. But what does it mean to be a lover who is swinging from the moral arc of the universe? Sikh activist and civil rights attorney Valerie Kaur believes that revolutionary love is the primary call of our times. Christian social ethicist Beverly Harrison insisted that love is not basically a feeling or a sentiment, but rather love is an active moral commitment to co-creating what she and I would call right or mutual relation, in which all parties are empowered to be themselves at their best. I call forth the best in you, you evoke the best in me. We empower each other. That is the moral work of love, whether between individuals like spouses and lovers, parents, children, teachers and students, friends, or between communities and collectives, different nations, different religions, neighborhoods, races, genders, dare I suggest political parties and movements, to call forth the best in each other. Can we actually imagine a future in which Democrats and Republicans and Greens and Independents and Socialists all call forth the best in each other? Of course, real love can happen only when both or all parties are open to being touched and changed through their shared experiences with and of one another. Working together, playing together, talking together, learning together, changing minds together, and whenever need be, doing the challenging, tough, moral work of taking stock of where wrongs have been inflicted. The hard work of repenting when we ourselves have been or are in the wrong, and of confronting those who have harmed us whenever we ourselves have been wounded by injustice, oppression, and hatred. Loving means making amends whenever we have wounded others, and it also means seeking amends wherever we ourselves have been wounded or wronged. There are no shortcuts in this work, no shortcuts in the moral work of love, no shortcuts to generating genuinely mutual relation with one another, whether as individuals, communities, political parties, or nations. No shortcuts to restoring our connectedness as sisters and brothers on this earth, which is why Henri Nouwen called patience the discipline of compassion. Through compassion, we want to get it right. We try to get it right. We reach out to make right relation with our human siblings on this planet. But it takes discipline. It takes time. It takes making amends. It takes conversion. It takes forgiveness, receiving forgiveness and giving forgiveness. It takes time, revolutionary patience. Several weeks ago, right here in this pulpit, Reverend Bob lifted up several cross-cultural images of the connectedness we both live in from a mystical perspective and strive for from a moral perspective. From Southern Africa, he noted the image of Ubuntu, our having common roots. From Native America, spiritual teachings, the image of all of us as relatives. From the Jewish social mystic Martin Buber, the image of I and thou, mutually empowering one another. Let me tell you a story about mutuality and patience in the work of love. My friend's sister Angela, a Franciscan nun, lived for decades in the Australian bush not far from Sydney. Angela was a mystic and a sculptor, as well as being a nun and eventually an Anglican priest. She believed passionately in Ubuntu, I and thou, and the power of radical mutuality at the heart of the sacred to touch and heal even the most deeply broken hearts. For much of her cloistered life, Angela had no contact with the outside world, only her sisters, the animals, and the plants who gathered round with them in their monastery in the Australian bush. And there was another woman in another part of the world. Along with Nelson Mandela, Helen Joseph, a white South African woman, had been arrested for her anti-apartheid activism, and alongside Mandela had been sentenced to confinement, while the black man Mandela had been sent to Robbins Island to serve 26 years in prison. The white woman, Helen Joseph, had been sent home for house arrest and confined to her own home, never to go out, but rather to receive hate mail, bomb threats, and other ugly signs of contempt from the white ruling minority day after day, month upon month, year after year. Somehow in the 80s, well into her house arrest and well into Angela's time in the monastery, Sister Angela heard of Helen Joseph's plight and wrote to her, thus beginning a correspondence between two women who were both cloistered, one by choice, the other by force. Their correspondence between a Christian mystic and a social activist agnostic became the subject of a fascinating BBC movie, Intimate Letters, in the 1990s. In their correspondence, Helen told Angela that she was frightened much of the time of everything, the threats, the loneliness, the darkness, the silence, the unknownness. In response, Angela sculpted a gift for Helen, which she sent her. Angela called it a holding cross, a smooth wooden cross which Helen could hold and know always, Angela said, whenever she held it, that someone was praying for her. This is the holding cross. And later the nuns in the monastery began carving these holding crosses and sent them all over the world to anyone who wanted them. Evidently, the holding cross meant a great deal to Helen Joseph, just as their relationship meant much to both women. Helen learned much about the power of Angela's faith, and Angela learned much about Helen's commitment to justice, specifically to anti-racism and other forms of social justice. I honestly don't know how Helen lived the rest of her life once she came out of house arrest in 1990. But I know very well that Sister Angela became an irrepressible force for anti-racism and anti-sexism and many forms of social justice in both Australia and the United States, a passion which she often attributed, in part, to Helen Joseph's influence. Mutuality. As it happened, Sister Angela came to live here in Brevard in our intentional community up on Sea-Off Mountain for the last 3 years of her life, from 1999 to 2002. Even here, she was relentless in pressing the churches in Brevard and elsewhere in the United States and back home in her native Australia to sharpen and make real their justice commitments. Angela often spoke with me about the power of patience in her life, a patience she had cultivated over 4 decades in the monastery. She said that patience grounded everything in her life at prayer, her artwork, her relationships with other nuns, most certainly her relationship with the ecclesiastical authorities of her time, and her efforts on behalf of justice for her Aboriginal neighbors in Australia and on behalf of social justice in the United States. In her patience, over time, grew not only Angela's compassion, but also her staying power. As I move toward closing, I want to return to Theodore Parker's musing on the arc of the moral universe, particularly on how he arrived at this belief. This is the part I had never heard. Parker did not say that he drew this conclusion via reason, nor through faith, nor through experience. 3 respectable, good routes to knowledge. Listen to what he said. I do not pretend to understand the moral universe. The arc is a long one. My eye reaches but little ways. I cannot calculate the cure and complete the figure by the experience of sight. I can divine it by conscience. But from what I see, he continues, I am sure it bends toward justice. How did Parker know this? He divined it by conscience. His conscience tells him the arc of the moral universe bends toward justice. It's not surprising to me that a person of Theodore Parker's stature in Unitarian and Transcendentalist traditions, 2 traditions with strong moral moorings, relied upon conscience to teach him a moral lesson. That is, after all, how conscience functions, as a moral compass in our lives. But be clear that conscience is not always, or even often, reasonable. We can't get there simply by reason. And too often, conscience is assigned a much lower spiritual status than faith is in our lives, though this may be less so for Unitarians than for Episcopalians and other Christians like me. What's remarkable here to me is that Parker perceived through his conscience that justice is not simply a good idea. It's not simply a matter for litigation. It's not simply a social goal. More than all of this, justice has its own power. It is forceful. It pulls at us like a magnetic field. Justice draws us toward it, and this draw is conscience. This pull is conscience. Justice, conscience, as its pull, lures us. Parker was suggesting, if I am hearing him correctly, that justice is what many Christians and other theists call God, an energy with its own force field, which is conscience. Indeed, the arc of the moral universe bends because it is being pulled toward justice by conscience. And now, as we are being pulled toward justice by conscience, we must exercise revolutionary patience as we navigate some treacherous currents that threaten to pull us under this very day. For a little while longer, we in the United States will have an unsteady hand on the tiller of our national ship. As with all people on the planet, a devastating virus is also moving among us. At the same time, our humanity and our earth are under attack by systemic evils of white supremacy, Christian nationalism, raging misogyny, and interactive global crises of advanced profit-driven capitalism, environmental plundering, and militaristic mindsets and institutions such as for-profit prisons and militarized police forces. These crises, in turn, are giving rise around the world to massive food insecurity, generating millions of refugees, stirring deep-seated fears that are sparking nativist impulses and authoritarian assaults on truth, empathy, common decency, and the milk of human kindness. And all of this, of course, is exhausting to us and sickening to much of the world, especially to the poorest and the most vulnerable among us, and especially to Black and brown and darker peoples on this planet. This is a daunting context, not to be taken lightly. In this daunting world of serious moral challenges, we can be grateful on this Thanksgiving weekend that we have each other. We have each other here at UUTC, and we have countless, really millions, billions, really, truly, truth be known, of other sisters and brothers and siblings here and around the world to share the work of making justice and to cultivate the spiritual gift of revolutionary patience as we swing together from the arc of the moral universe, and we ourselves bend it toward justice. Amen.
Forward through the ages in unbroken line, move the faithful spirits at the call divine, gifts in differing measure, hearts of one accord, manifold the service, one the sure reward. Forward through the ages in unbroken line, move the faithful spirits at the call divine. Wider grows the vision, realm of love and light. For it we must labor till our faith is sight. Prophets have proclaimed it, martyrs testified, poets sung its glory, heroes for it died. Forward through the ages in unbroken line, move the faithful spirits at the call divine. Not alone we conquer, not alone we fall. In each loss or triumph, lose or triumph all, bound by God's far purpose in one living whole, move we on together to the shining goal. Forward through the ages in unbroken line, move the faithful spirits at the call divine.
In closing, I want to share with you a portion of a poem by Dorothea Zola in her book, Revolutionary Patience. She is referring here, of course, to Jesus of Nazareth, a brother and a friend. Fire was not sacred to him, or neon, not singing or silence, not fornication or chastity. In his speech, foxes, bread dough, and much mended nets became sacred. The down and out were his proof, and actually he had about as much assurance of victory as we do. None. Go ahead, compare him to other great figures. Socrates, Rosa Luxemburg, Gandhi. He'll stand the test. It would be better, of course, if you compared him with yourself. It's supposed to show greatness that he didn't say anything when they took him prisoner, when they shoved him into a room, when they shone a light in his face, when they interrogated him, when they testified against him, when they lied about him, when they lied about his father, when they lied about his mother, when they lied about his brothers, when they lied about his sisters, when they lied about his intentions. that he didn't say anything is supposed to show greatness? I don't know. When they lie about him, I want to scream. I, as you have noticed, like to bring things down to earth, miraculous loaves, obedient waves, even the deathbeds of children lying asleep in cages. They occur in the stories of ancient peoples. Go ahead, cut him down to size, take away the loaves, the sea, the halt, the lame. You'll get them back when you begin to see with his eyes every day. Cripples start out for the kingdom. The blind begin to see. All his miracles become the most natural things in the world when we make them come about.